If you're looking for new journal ideas that are a little bit more interesting than things like include a monthly log, set up a key, then this is the video for you. In this video, we're looking at 25 ideas for your new journal setup, and our first one starts on the inside cover here. This one is an inside cover pocket. Now you can buy pre-made ones of these that are already appropriately folded and come with tape on the back, or you can do what I've done here and just make one for yourself. This has a similar function to the gusseted pocket that you might have in the back of your journal, but I find that having it in the inside cover just makes it a little bit more accessible. I've done this one as a triangle, so you can easily slip things in and out of the side here, and this can be great for storing things like flat ephemera, a small ruler, or even what we have for our second idea, which is a little card that has a tracker on it. This is what I'm calling a tracker bookmark, and it's effectively a removable version of a year in pixels. Rather than having the year in pixels layout done on an actual page in your notebook, you have it as this removable piece, so you can move it to whichever page you're working on in your notebook. This one is set up so that we have a column for each of the months of the year, and then a row for each of the days, 1 through 31. Of course, not every month has 31 days, so you can see the end here is a kind of jagged line, which only has the number of days appropriate for the month in question. I've just done this one on a spare piece of paper that I've cut out of the back of my notebook or gotten from making a Dutch door, but I find that having a tracker like this removable means 1, if you set up multiple journals a year, you can take it from notebook to notebook. You don't have to reset the layout up. And 2, I have a tendency to neglect my start of journal pages. You might find that you do the same. So having it set up in a way that you can take it to whichever page or month you're working on just makes it a little bit more handy. I notably haven't included any space for a key on this one, but you could make it a little bit wider to include that information as well. On this one, essentially, it would just be coloring in for any day that you did do something, and then leaving it blank for any day that you didn't. Maybe if there's a particular habit or routine you're trying to build, you could have that on here. Flipping over though, we have another idea, and this is a monthly checklist. As it says on the card, you'd populate this with things that you need to do or remember on a monthly basis. So this could be filled with any kind of sections to help yourself when you do your monthly setups. I have this in 3 sections, so things to add to the calendar, pages to include in the setup, and then reflection questions. But depending on how you like to do your monthly setups, what kind of information you like to include, you can set this one up however you like. You may notice that this one is a little bit shiny, and that's because I've put contact paper over the top to make this one reusable. You could also just laminate it, especially because it's not stuck into your notebook. But what this means is that as you do each of these individual things, you can just go down the list, check them off, maybe with a slightly thinner marker than this one, and then once you've completely finished it, at the end of the month you can just rub that off and use the little card again. Of course, you could just do this with pencil, but I like the idea of being able to use pen on top of it. Slipping that one back into our inside cover pocket, and our next idea is what I like to call little reminders. This is another one that I like to have at the very start of my journal, just so that it's easy to reference, and this is essentially a space to note down any little tidbits, pieces of information, quotes that you come across, anything that kind of resonates and you want to remember for later. This is an idea that I've enjoyed using in the front of my journal. I just write them out on a separate piece of paper and then stick them in the front here, but it's just a place to capture any little pieces of inspiration, motivation, or any little insightful moments that you have. Our next idea is another one that I find super helpful, and that's having a shopping list on a sticky note in the front of my journal. Oftentimes I use this for things that I'm not just going to be able to readily get in my everyday shopping, so not so much stuff at the grocery store or any places that I frequently visit, but more so places that I either need to go further afield to find, or maybe I need to put an online order in at a place that I don't typically shop from, or just anything that I'm kind of holding off until I have a few items on the list and I can buy them all at once and save on shipping. I prefer to put this one on a sticky note in the front of the notebook. 1, front of the notebook because it's easy to access, and 2, sticky note because it means it's replaceable. This isn't information that I really need to keep long term, and I don't want to sprinkle it throughout my notebook because then I need to go find all of the items. If they're all together and right in the front, I'll be able to find it. Flipping on forward for our next idea, this one is to have a layout spacing reference in your journal. Now you might have heard of a layout grid guide or a grid spacing reference. This is kind of similar to that in the sense that it does give you divisions for how to separate your page, but But here we're not so much looking at equal divisions, like how to separate it into halves or thirds. More so you have maps or kind of schematics for common layouts that you like to use. Then, rather than having to like remember how big each of the individual boxes are, how much space each of them take up, or flip back in your notebook and find the last time you set it up, you can have a handy go-to reference that tells you exactly how much space you need for each of those sections. This is another one that you might want to set up as a removable layout, or one that's not actually like a page in your notebook, so that you can take it to whichever spread you're working on and set it up from that reference. But this can be really good for any of the layouts that you set up regularly that have spacings that are a little bit odd or a little bit hard to remember. The next idea though is what we're calling in case of. So in case of impatience, in case of sadness, in case of anxiety. This one was inspired by Nala Shore, and I think it is a super cute idea, but effectively any common thoughts, feelings that you have, ones that maybe are a little bit more negative or you want to either like mitigate, avoid, work away from, you make yourself a little card that tells you the steps that you can take to get away from that mindset. The title of this one is effectively based on the idea of in case of emergency, like break glass kind of a thing, but if we pull those ones out, you just have a little card for each of them with space to write down the things that you can do to tackle this emotion. If you were going to make this one for yourself, I would populate it with things that I know work well for me, things that I've tried before and found success with. I haven't written any specific ideas down on this one, but that's because all of the layouts that I've set up in this video are just ideas. This notebook is what I call my R&D or research and development notebook. It's where I make all of these layout ideas for the channel. But putting those together and putting them back into our little pocket. The next idea is actually specifically related to the pocket. In this one you can see that each of the cards have been sized so that we have this kind of little waterfall or staggered kind of look to it. This means that you can see the titles of each of the cards from the front. None of them zip perfectly behind each other and hide the titles. That means that when you come to this page you can pull out the one that you want and leave the others behind. Of course, I've done this as an in case of kind of layout, but you could also do it so that you have little checklists for each day of the week. You could use it for swatch cards for different pens that you have. Maybe the smallest pen collection goes first, followed by a slightly larger one and then a larger one. Or you could use it for any other kind of information that would be held on separate individual cards. The little cards again just came from offcuts from the journal, and then this little pocket is one that I made just using some extra dot grid paper. If you want to though, you can just go and buy a little envelope and double-sided tape that in. It's a lot easier than trying to make your own envelope honestly, but I like the way that the pink matches the tape. Our next idea also follows on with having multiple options for things, and this is what we call a Dopamenu, or effectively a dopamine menu. Now you don't actually have to write this one as if it's a menu in the kind of eating sense, but I really like the idea of it. So for instance, starters would be little maybe 5-minute things. Stuff that doesn't turn into a giant time suck, but they're little bits and pieces that you can do to give you a little dopamine kick. Sides would be things that you can do while doing other things. For instance, like listening to music while you're doing your work. Mains would require a bit more time and planning to actually do. And then desserts would be stuff that's good to enjoy in moderation, but don't make it the main meal of your day. Unless you want to. I'm not going to tell you not to eat dessert. Effectively, the way that you would use this one though is that when you either have a little bit of time and you want to do a starter task, or if you're trying to plan your week and sprinkle in some dopamine mains, you'd come to this kind of layout, which obviously mine's just a section of the page because it's just an idea, but come to wherever you've set it up in your journal, have a look through all of the options and pick out the ones that spark joy. That one was number 9, and if you're enjoying the ideas so far, make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. But flipping on over, the next one is a future log, but specifically a categorized future log. This is a way of making your future log just a little bit more organized. It's a lot easier at a glance to pull out key information. I've separated this one into 3 main sections. So we have regular events down the bottom, birthdays in the middle, could also be birthdays and anniversaries if you want, and then at the top there would be like those big ticket items. This could either be like a month-long theme that you're trying to do. For instance, if you're saying that January is just your like physical health month, you're really trying to kickstart those physical health habits. Or it could be month-long celebrations, for instance like October being Breast Cancer Awareness Month, or anything else that feels particularly key or important to record. You could also split this one so it's like work versus personal, or if you have multiple jobs, maybe having separate sections for each of those. As said, it's just a really good way to make your future log a bit more user-friendly. doing future you a favor. After this one, our next idea is a list of yearly favorites. Now, I really like the idea of matching this to the year, so if it's 2025, you do 25 of them, if it's 2026, you do 26, so on and so forth. You do not have to arrange it in a grid like this. I just liked the idea of including pictures for all of the favorite things. These are some of my favorite things. Let me know if we have any common favorites, but you could just do this one as a simple list, as a journaling page. It's just a way to record the stuff that kind of sparks joy, resonates with you. You could also do this as a things I tried list as well. Possibly things I tried and enjoyed, but they don't necessarily have to be favorites. They could just be things that you felt were fun to try, you had a go, and you might even be inclined to try them again. Because I like the idea of balance, our next idea has a similar structure, but this one is a New Year bingo board. Rather than making this something like a self-care bingo or like a personal bingo with like 25 goals or whatever that you want to do, this one is very much a bit of fun, and it's all about making predictions for the new year. They can be as unhinged or as tame as you want them to be, but I've seen a couple people do this in their journals, and I think it's a really fun idea. This one is inspired by those times where something crazy happens during the year, and people have a tendency to say, oh, well, that wasn't on my bingo board, kind of a thing. Well, now we have a bingo board, and it could have been. I've made these mainly kind of celebrity or pop culture related, but you could also have them being like planner related, journal related. They could be specifically for your life, or it could be a little bit more like world news stuff. This could also be a really fun one to set up with friends as like a New Year's Eve party game or something. But flipping on over, and our next idea is kind of purely a decorative one, but that is using waterfall tabs, or what I like to call waterfall Dutch doors. You can see those ones down the side here, but effectively with each subsequent page, you've cut off a little bit less of the page, so you're left with this very pretty piece of decoration down the edge. The way that I would typically do this one is count out how many layouts you want to use in the setup, and then starting at the backmost one, stick down your tape along the edge of the page. Then, flipping to the page that would come before that, stick down the next piece of tape, so it's going to butt up or kind of slightly overlap the one that you initially put down. It very much helps here if you keep a little bit of tape hanging out either side as you do this, just so that then as you work your way towards the front of the journal, laying down the pieces of tape, you can very easily see that when you cut away the edge of the page, you won't be left with any kind of awkward white space. Once the tape is laid down though, then it's just time to trim away the excess edges of the pages. You should be trimming down the first page, or the one that's closest to the front of the notebook the most, then the next one should get trimmed down a little less, and the one that comes after that a little less again. The very back page won't have any trimming, but once the trimming is done, you should be able to see this kind of tiered or waterfall effect with each of these pages. As said, it is more of a decorative idea than a functional one, but it can also be a really good way to flex your creative muscles and try out page sizes that are a little different to the typical. Our next idea though is called Inspiration Station, and this is a place to write down any ideas that come to you, either while watching pieces of media, reading, watching this video for instance. If as we've been going through you've had ideas about layouts that you want to set up in your journal, we want somewhere to write those down because we want you to actually take action on them. So many times I'll watch a video or read a book or something and be like, oh yeah, that's a really cool idea, and then it's instantly lost to the ether, never to be thought of again. This one though I've set up using the Alistair method. We have effectively columns for different areas. You'd put a little cross underneath the relevant column and then write the idea out on the right hand side here. For instance, in this one, the little apple icon would mean food, so any meals that I want to make I'd write down to the side here and put a little X under that apple. Anything under the little book icon could be related to my journal and things I want to try in that. Essentially, each of these columns would be categories or life areas that you're collecting ideas for, and then those ideas would just get listed along the side. You could of course just do this in different sections if you wanted to, you don't have to have them all in one running list. And as you write these ideas down, try to make sure you include enough detail or where to find those details later, just so that you don't come back and read this and go, I have literally no idea what past me was saying. Having some kind of like link or reference to refer to can be very useful for going back and kind of getting re-inspired, or giving credit to your original inspiration sources if you're going to be sharing things. Our next idea is not actually on this page, it's up here, but that's having a completed page checkbox. I find this super helpful for any pages that I'm using that have like a lot of information on them, and there's going to be a point where the page isn't necessary to come back to. All of the information on that page has either been actioned, migrated to somewhere else, maybe it's just kind of expired, I don't really need to use it anymore. But rather than coming back to this very busy page of information and rechecking every single entry to see if there's anything I need to account for, I can tell future me, no, this page is done with, and just put in a checkbox with a little tick in it. I've used this previously during migration processes to say like everything on here has been accounted for, everything on here has been accounted for, I don't have to go through and recheck everything. This is just a nice little indicator to future me that the page is done with. I typically like to put them in the top corner of the page just so that then I can kind of flick through the pages and see them all very easily, but you could also put them down the bottom, in the middle, wherever makes sense for you. Our next idea though is what we're calling weekly roadblocks, and this is just a summary of things that are coming up in the week that might hinder your work on whatever you're working on. For me, that would be thinking about things like goals, but the way that I've seen this used also is in terms of meal planning. So what's happening in the week that means that I need to account for it when I make my meal plan. There's no point putting a 3 or more hour very elaborate meal on a day that I'm getting home late because we had a team professional development meeting. Not that I have much of a team, I'm a team of one. This is my job, but anywho. You don't necessarily have to set it up as structured as we have here, so having a box for each day of the week where you can write notes down. This could just be a very small summary that you put on your weekly log. You could even use a monthly calendar to do this kind of thing if you wanted to, but having it in this kind of physical space means that you actually have to look at it and account for it when you come to do any kind of planning. As said, you can use it for meal planning, you can use it for scheduling goal work, any kind of project you're working on, that kind of thing. Flipping over though, our next idea is what we're calling a spark list. And this is essentially just a list to come and refer to spark inspiration. If I was setting one up, I would probably categorize it by the different types of areas or things that I'm trying to spark inspiration for. So for instance, having a section for journaling and maybe some journaling prompts, having a section for art making and different things that I can consider or will help me spark inspiration for making that art. These things won't always be just prompts for writing or creating. It could be stuff like trying a new medium if you're thinking about like art or painting or something. It could just be things to consider to help you generate new ideas. Your categories are very much going to depend on what type of things you're trying to spark inspiration for, but our next idea is called a tiny wins log. Now, let me know if you can relate to this, but oftentimes I get to the end of any day or week and I'm sat there thinking, what did I even accomplish? Like, I just get this feeling that I've been wasting my time, even though technically, logically I know I've been doing stuff and I have made progress. It just feels like I haven't. The tiny wins log is here to help us combat this. What I would be doing is aiming to every day write down one thing that I accomplished that felt like a win. It doesn't need to be huge. It's literally called the tiny wins log. So this could be something as small as I took a sip of water. Like, if water drinking is not something you're very good at, hello, it is me, then maybe that would go on your tiny wins log. It could be, I finished reading that report for work. I didn't respond sassily to the email from Susan in marketing. If your name is Susan and you're in marketing, just know I'm not actually talking about you. Sorry, Susan, from marketing. But any of those small little things that kind of feel like a little accomplishment, they would go on the tiny wins log, just as a way to help us kind of combat our negativity bias and recognize that we are making progress. Our next idea though is a do more of tracker. For this one, you can see we have the initials for the months of the year down the side, and then some icons along the top. Those icons would be related to different things that you, funnily enough, want to do more of. So maybe you're trying to be really intentional about going outdoors and like walking in nature. Maybe you're trying to have more social events or actually get out of the house and see people. Whatever it is that you're trying to do, you would put those along the top, and then as the month progresses, you could put a little tally or a little count in the box to say how many times you did those things. The idea is to try and build those numbers up. I mean, within reason, of course, very much depends on the things that you've included. But if you find that you're not getting very many instances of those in, you can try and make a more conscious effort to bring more of them into your life. I've seen this type of layout done with people who like to read, and in particular want to expand the genres they're reading. Maybe they want to read more horror or thriller or mystery books. Maybe they're really into sci-fi, but they'd like to explore more romance. You can use this kind of layout for that as well. But flipping on over, our next idea is a commonly forgotten list. Now this one very much depends on what you commonly forget, and I would actually recommend making a series of lists. For instance, I really like to have a list called last minute packing because it's the stuff that I typically forget when we go away on a trip, and I just want to make sure that it's in my bag just before I leave the house. Some other examples of ones you can include though would be a regular packing list. It could be a list of things to do before leaving the house, like do you have your keys, your card, your wallet, like whatever else you need. It could be the steps that you need to take when you're doing a budget review. It could be preparing for a new school term, either as a teacher or a student or a parent or anywhere in between. Master grocery lists, health maintenance, pretty much anything that has a set of steps that you need to take or need to do or need to check, and there are usually some elements that you forget. Do future you a favor, write them down in a list that you can refer to at a later point in time. The next idea we have though is a QR dashboard. This could be for things that you need to access often and they're not easily findable. Yes, you can save them as bookmarks on your computer, completely fair, but if you're out and about, sometimes it's easier to just whip out the camera on your phone, scan the QR code, and it takes you exactly where you need to go. This can also be really useful for any links that you like to share with other people. For instance, if you like to go to a lot of journal hangouts and you want to connect with people online, have a little QR code that takes them to your Instagram or something. These can be super helpful time savers. Another one that can be really good is if you like to do productivity sprints or like task batching that's time restricted, have a little QR code that links you to a playlist of timers. You could even put little QR codes on your inspiration station space, so it has maybe a QR code that takes you to your Pinterest board or something. Our next idea though is what I call a want analysis. So anytime I'm doing a new journal setup, whether that be like a fully new journal or just a new month or even a new weekly, this is what I like to do. Want here stands for wins, aversions, needs, and things to try. And essentially, I think about each of these categories and write down my thoughts anytime I come to plan a new journal setup. Wins are the things that worked, you liked them, you want more of this. Aversions are the things that didn't work, they need to be changed or tweaked. You didn't like them, it needs to be addressed. Your needs are any elements or features that you think would be helpful for the upcoming setup, and things that you want to try are things that you want to try. Anything to test or trial in your journal. By filling in each of these sections, it helps me organize my thoughts, and then I can take that information and apply it to whatever setup that I'm planning. Flipping on over though, our next idea is to use a digital layout planner rather than sketching things into your notebook. When you sketch things into your notebook, there's usually a lot of drawing, erasing, redrawing, reerasing, and essentially the way that I plan every single setup I make now is in a digital format. It's a really good way to get a good appreciation for how your layouts are actually going to look, because you can use colors, lettering styles, even bring in pictures and stuff if you want to, though often I don't. It gives you a much better appreciation of how the layout will actually look when you're finished, compared to trying to do everything in pencil and it all just being in kind of grayscale and loosely sketched in. I do have a layout planning template you can use, that one's linked in the description box, or we have a QR code for it as well. Our next idea though is for anybody who's been journaling for a minute and they've kept their previous journals but don't necessarily know where to find things. That would be a master index. This is just writing down for each of the journals you have, what kind of layouts do you find that you're wanting to refer back to time and time again. We have a couple examples here. So for instance, on my first journal, this had November 2016 through to May 2017. So I wrote down each of the months and the New Year setup and what theme I included for each of those. This one's more helpful for me because making journal ideas is my job, but if you had any kind of special layouts, collections in there that you do find yourself wanting to refer back to, for instance, swatches, notes, anything like that, you could write out what the layout is and what page number to find it on, if you have a numbered journal. For instance, in my R&D journals, like this guy, this one has meal planning layouts, reading layouts, it might have savings trackers, checklist ideas, 25 ideas for a new journal setup, and just having a go-to reference to be like, okay, where is that page? Can be quite useful. This idea here though is a lot of fun, and it's what we're calling yearly awards. Now these aren't actual awards, nobody's probably handing out trophies for these unless you want to, but this is thinking about some different things that you could give awards in to kind of summarize your year. It effectively becomes a memory keeping page, but things like the best adventure you had, what was the best book that you read, what was the biggest risk that you took, what was a moment that was really super awkward. The categories that you use are completely up to you. You can tweak them the way that you want, just like any of the ideas we've had in this video. But this can be a really nice way to just summarize your year as a whole and think about the different elements that made you smile, felt like milestones, anything like that. If you enjoyed these suggestions for your next journal setup, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel so that you don't miss out on our future journal ideas videos. But if you wanted even more layouts that you can use, then the next video to check out is this one, where we talk about another 24 ideas you could use. That one has some of my favorite and most helpful journaling ideas, so click or tap on that one and I'll see you over there.